The sound of shattering glass mixed with mocking laughter around me. Razor-sharp shards cut into my skin, leaving crimson streaks across my arms and cheeks. I lay still on the cold marble floor, my breath ragged, yet the corners of my lips curved into a smile. No one in that lavish room understood that what had just happened had forever shattered the illusion they had built. My father, Richard Hayes, the man once hailed as a self-made entrepreneur from nothing, loomed above me, his face flushed with rage, his fist clenched so tightly the knuckles turned white. He growled, his voice hoarse. "Get up, Ava. Get up and get out of my house." I let out a faint laugh, even as blood seeped down onto the silver evening gown I had chosen for tonight. In my mind echoed a single thought: his house? If he knew the truth, he would never dare to say that. Before I tell you what happened next, let me take you back 6 months, when it all began. My name is Ava Hayes, 32 years old. To my family, I had always been the timid daughter, never glamorous enough to appear in magazines or at glittering galas. But the truth is, for the past 12 years, I was the one quietly building the technology backbone that turned Hayes Dynamics from a small electronics repair shop into a corporation worth hundreds of millions of dollars. My brother Ethan graced magazine covers, played golf with clients, and basked in the spotlight. My sister Sophia wore designer gowns, attended fundraisers, and posed as a philanthropic star. Me. They locked me away in back rooms, buried in endless lines of code, contracts, and ideas that I created. Father always said, "You're not fit for the public. Let Ethan handle that. He has the looks, the charm. You belong behind the scenes, right where you are." Those words cut deep, but I stayed silent. I chose to turn anger into fuel, quietly building systems, quadrupling revenue in just 5 years. Every success, every accolade they claimed as their own. I was left with nothing more than the title of nameless technical consultant. Then one late autumn night, while reviewing financial records, I noticed irregular flows of money. Millions of dollars ran through shell companies, withdrawn and then funneled back. At first, I thought it was a system glitch. But the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. My father and Ethan were siphoning funds, preparing to sell off the company, not to expand but to strip it down and sell it in parts. Hundreds of employees would lose their jobs, the company's future would collapse, and over a decade of my work would turn to ash. I knew that confronting them head-on would be useless. They'd laugh, pat my head as if I were still 12, and dismiss me from every meeting. So I made a plan. Over the next 6 months, I moved in silence. I worked with lawyers and accountants, people who understood how to shift capital and ownership without drawing attention. Father always boasted that the company belonged to the Hayes family, never realizing that soon the family would mean just me. Patiently, I bought shares through independent entities, seizing control piece by piece through their own carelessness. By last week, it was done. I held 52% of Hayes Dynamics. But I kept pretending. I kept taking their sneers, their dismissive glances. I wanted to see how far they'd go, how much they'd destroy before I lifted the curtain. And then, tonight, my father's 60th birthday, inside the grand mansion on Miami's shoreline, with hundreds of guests in attendance, the script unfolded exactly as I expected. In the ornate study, I overheard Ethan boasting, "The buyers are ready. Next week, once the sale is announced, it'll all be finished." Sophia, nervous, asked, "What about Ava? She knows the systems better than anyone." Father's mocking laugh filled the room. "That girl's nothing but a computer fixer. She's weak just like her mother." I stepped inside, a folder in my hand. No more bowing my head. I said just 3 words. "No. Not selling." They froze. I placed the papers on the desk, my voice steady. "Because this company belongs to me." Silence hung heavy for a moment before Father roared, lunging at me. His rage exploded, his fist slammed down, and then he dragged me toward the glass doors. "You think you can steal from me?" A violent shove, and my body flew through the thick glass. The sharp blast rang out, shards piercing my skin, my breath stolen away. The guests froze. But while my father stood there, his face twisted with hatred, I still managed to smile, speaking just loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're mistaken, Father. This is no longer your house." Blood still trickled down my chin, soaking the edge of my dress, but I sat upright on the cold marble floor. The chandelier light reflected off each shard of shattered glass, turning the room into a glittering battlefield. Every guest stood silent, some already raising their phones to record. My father, Richard Hayes, stood heaving, eyes flashing with both fury and fear. Ethan frowned, rushing forward to pull him back, but father shoved him aside. Sophia froze by the doorway, her eyes restless, fingers gripping her sparkling clutch. I pressed my hand to the ground and rose, shards of glass cascading from my gown. Looking straight at my father, my voice raspy but clear. You think you hold everything, but in truth you lost it all long ago. The entire room fell into silence. I was no longer the timid daughter. This was the moment to reveal what I had hidden for half a year. I stepped up, my voice echoing through the grand hall. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting the celebration. But I believe you should witness the truth. The Hayes dynamics you all admire was never Richard Hayes's. Every contract, every innovation, every expansion strategy was built by me. Whispers rippled across the room. Some even gasped aloud. My father's glare could have burned through me. Daughter, stop. This is not a matter to air out. I answered with a calm smile. No, father. This is exactly the time to air it out. From my bag, I pulled out a thick stack of documents and slammed it onto the long table. The dry thud echoed sharply. For the past 6 months, I've been buying shares through multiple intermediaries. As of last week, I now hold 52% of this corporation. All legal, all certified by lawyers and auditors. Hayes Dynamics belongs to me. The room froze. Ethan scoffed, stepping forward. You think a few pieces of paper can change reality? You'll always just be the woman hiding behind a computer screen. I tilted my head, my tone like steel. It's precisely because I was hidden that you never realized you were handing everything to me. Sophia's grip on her clutch tightened, her face trembling. For the first time I saw true fear in her eyes. Turning to the crowd, I declared, you may have come tonight expecting a glamorous party. But what you're witnessing is the truth. A father throwing his daughter through a glass door just because she dared protect the company from being sold off. This is the self-made man you've all applauded for years. Dozens of phone cameras shot up. I knew within hours this would spread across social media. Richard Hayes fumbled his phone from his pocket. The screen lit with a flood of alerts. Bank accounts frozen. Properties transferred. His face drained of color. Audible. Ava, you dare. I stood tall, dried blood on my face, but my voice never wavered. Father, you always said I wasn't strong enough to fight you. But you forgot, I am my mother's daughter. And she taught me, never bow to what's wrong. Tonight, I didn't just reclaim the company. I reclaimed the truth. And this is only the beginning. For years, I swallowed humiliation, convincing myself that as long as the company survived and employees had jobs, my sacrifice was worth it. But then one winter night I realized my silence was feeding a far worse reality. That night I stayed at headquarters until 3 a.m. The server room was silent, broken only by the hum of cooling fans. I combed through the quarterly financial reports, a habit of mine to ensure the system ran smoothly. But this time the numbers didn't add up. There were massive amounts of money, tens of millions of dollars, being shuffled back and forth between anonymous accounts. I checked again and again thinking the system had glitched. But the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. I traced each transaction, uncovering a string of shell companies set up in Delaware, Nevada, even overseas. All of them led back to two names, Richard Hayes and Ethan Hayes. They had been bleeding the company for years, moving money out and then funneling it back in, creating a fake financial picture. Worse, buried in internal emails hidden in the server, I read their final plan. Sell off the entire corporation to a foreign conglomerate, break it apart into pieces for quick profit. I remember sitting still for hours, my hand trembling on the mouse. Everything I had given, thousands of sleepless nights, was just the foundation for them to destroy in exchange for fast cash. The next morning at breakfast, I tested the waters. There are rumors about selling the company. Is it true? Father set down his newspaper, smirking. Just rumors. Focus on your work, don't worry about the big things. Ethan added, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Ava, just stick to checking system errors. Business isn't your lane. Sophia sat silent, eyes fixed on her coffee cup, not daring to look up. They thought I would nod again, stay quiet like always. But inside me, a fire had already begun to burn. In the days that followed, I quietly gathered evidence. I screenshotted records, backed up emails, downloaded entire transaction histories. The more I uncovered, the more I realized it wasn't just embezzlement. Father and Ethan were using company assets as collateral to borrow hundreds of millions more. If the sell-off went through, every employee would be left with nothing while they walked away with pockets full. I realized that if I only revealed the truth, they'd deny it. Father had too many connections, Ethan had enough charm to manipulate public opinion. I needed another way. That's when I called Sarah Klein, an old friend, now a corporate lawyer. Sarah went silent after hearing my story, then said simply, "Ava, if going head-on won't work, then we go sideways. Think bigger, ownership." From that day we started a bold plan. Accumulate shares from the inside so that one day I wouldn't just expose them, I'd take control. But while we prepared, family tension grew sharper. Every meal became a performance. Father boomed about his vision. Ethan bragged about signing deals as if they were his achievements. Sophia still smiled for the cameras. Me? I sat quietly, calculating in my head. How many more percent until I reached full control? Each time Father dismissed me with, "Don't meddle in grown-up business," my resolve hardened. Each time Ethan mocked, "You're just the little sister behind a screen," I grew more certain the moment to flip the game was near. I had been underestimated too long. And they didn't realize, the more they dismissed me, the closer they pushed me toward the truth they feared most. Because in the Hayes family, conflict was never just words. It was a silent war, and I was ready to strike first. After uncovering the full scheme of embezzlement and the plan to dismantle the company, I knew I couldn't wait another second. If they pulled it off, Hayes Dynamics would disappear and hundreds of loyal employees, the ones who had trusted me all these years, would be thrown out on the street. Sarah Klein, my friend and sharp corporate lawyer, said the words that crystallized everything for me. "Ava, if you want to save the company, you can't just reveal the truth. You need the legal power to stop them." I remember sitting in silence for a long time before slowly nodding. Yes, there was only one way: seize control of the corporation. We began by setting up a network of shell companies from Delaware to Florida. These companies were in the names of people completely unrelated to my family: a retired engineer, an interior designer, even a homemaker. In reality, all of them were controlled by Sarah and her team. I funneled capital step by step, carefully, like an underground river no one noticed. Every time Ethan and Father were busy with parties, signing flashy contracts to keep the media fooled, I quietly signed to buy another percent from small shareholders who were fed up with the Hayes family's leadership. No one suspected a thing. On paper, those shares were simply sold to obscure investment firms. The first month I secured 12%. By the second month, that number had risen to 23%. I remember one stormy night sitting in my small apartment in Dallas, looking down at the blurred yellow streetlights. Sarah handed me a thick stack of documents, her eyes gleaming. "Ava, if everything goes smoothly, in just 3 more months, you'll hold controlling power." I gripped the file, my hand trembling, but inside me burned a fierce determination. My family noticed nothing unusual. Richard, my father, still strutted proudly on stage, boasting that the company was in his steady hands. Ethan still smiled for the press, posing with investors. Sophia continued her glittering charity galas. And me, as always, played the role of the backstage daughter. I went to work on time, came home late, spoke little, never argued. They thought I had grown used to being hidden, dismissed. But they didn't know. Their dismissal had become the perfect cloak for my plan. Once, at a party in the Miami beachfront mansion, I overheard my father say to a guest, "Ava just knows how to sit at a computer. But thankfully, with her keeping the systems running, we can focus on the bigger things." The guest laughed, and I sat a few feet away, pretending not to hear. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed in my purse. Another share transaction completed. Those months were suffocatingly tense. Each time I transferred funds, signed contracts, or set up a new entity, I feared a single mistake would expose me. But I knew they were too arrogant, too distracted with their own schemes, to notice a shadow like me. The closer I got to my goal, the heavier the weight on my shoulders. There were nights I sat at my computer until 4 a.m., my head spinning from dozens of spreadsheets and stock charts. But when I thought of my mother, the woman who had believed I was meant for something greater, I found strength again. By the final week, everything was ready. I had consolidated enough shares through independent entities. Lawyers and auditors signed off on every transaction. When Sarah placed the last folder on the table, her voice nearly cracked with emotion. "Ava, you officially hold 52% of Hayes Dynamics." I sat in silence, unable to speak. In my mind echoed Father's mocking laugh, Ethan's sneers, Sophia's cold stare. And then it all faded, leaving only one truth: the company belonged to me. But I kept quiet. I let Father and Ethan believe they were still in control. I kept working as usual, kept accepting their condescension, kept letting them play the roles of powerful patriarch and perfect heir. Because I wanted to witness with my own eyes the moment their masks fell. That day came sooner than I expected. It was Richard's 60th birthday, the mansion by the sea ablaze with lights, guests crowding every corner. My father stood in the center hall, wine glass raised, boasting as always. Ethan grinned broadly, Sophia glided through in a dazzling red gown. And me standing quietly in the corner, observing. In my purse was the file proving ownership. In my heart burned a fire that couldn't be extinguished. They didn't know that within hours their world would collapse. Richard Hayes's 60th birthday party was a spectacle of extravagance. The Miami beachfront mansion glowed with lights, luxury cars packed the driveway, fine wine flowed endlessly. Guests were prominent entrepreneurs, politicians, journalists, all gathered to celebrate the man who built a tech empire from nothing. I stepped into the grand hall in a shimmering silver dress. My face lightly made up, my hair flowing, enough to blend into the crowd unnoticed. But in my handbag I carried what would forever change the night: the documents proving I was the controlling shareholder of Hayes Dynamics. My father, Richard, stood before the crowd, his voice booming. 60 years old, and I'm proud to say the future of Hayes Dynamics will shine even brighter. The guests raised their glasses in unison, applause echoing loudly. From my corner I watched, my chest burning. Then suddenly I heard Ethan's laughter drifting out from the study. The door was ajar and I moved closer. "The buyer is ready," Ethan said. "Once we announce next week, it'll all be done." Sophia's voice slipped in, soft but clear. "What about Ava? She knows the system better than anyone." My father's scornful laugh filled the room. "She's nothing but a computer fixer. She's weak just like her mother." I froze for a moment. Heat surged through me, but instead of tears I opened my bag, pulled out the file and pushed the door wide. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice unervingly calm. "But this discussion needs one more person." 3 faces turned toward me. Shock flashed in their eyes, quickly replaced by irritation. My father frowned. "This is a private conversation, Ava. Leave." I shook my head, tossing out a single word. "No." The air froze. Never in my life had I dared to say that word to him. I stepped to the table, set the file down. "You cannot sell the company. Because it no longer belongs to you." Ethan let out a mocking laugh. "You think a few sheets of paper can change everything? You've always been the girl behind a screen, Ava. Don't fool yourself." I looked straight at my brother, my voice steady. "I've purchased enough shares to become the controlling shareholder. 52%, all legal, certified by attorneys. Hayes Dynamics now belongs to me." At that moment the room fell silent. Sophia backed away, her face pale. My father snatched the folder, flipping through each page. Every line struck his lifelong pride like a slap. "Impossible," Richard roared. "This is forged." "It's all real," I answered, my gaze unblinking. "The only forgery here is your contract to sell the company." Whispers began buzzing among the guests as some crowded toward the door, witnessing the unprecedented scene. Father lunged at me, gripping my collar. "You dare betray me?" "I'm not betraying you." I tightened my hand on his fist. "I'm saving this company." Those words pushed him over the edge. In his fury, he dragged me out of the study, shoving me straight into the grand hall. The crowd parted in shock as Richard Hayes hauled his youngest daughter like a criminal. The chatter died instantly. "Get out of my house," he bellowed, then with all his strength, shoved me hard. My body crashed into the massive glass doors leading to the terrace. A sharp blast rang out, glass shattering, shards flying everywhere. I hit the cold stone floor, pain searing through my arm. Gasps erupted across the room. Several guests instinctively pulled out their phones, recording the horrifying moment. I lay amid the shards, blood streaking my skin, but the corner of my lips curled. I looked directly at my father, his breath ragged, face twisted with rage. My voice, hoarse but carrying across the hall. "You're mistaken, father. This is no longer your house." The air grew heavy as lead. Murmurs rippled everywhere. Richard froze, unable to believe what he had heard. I pushed myself up, shards tinkling off me, and looked around the hall where dozens of phone cameras pointed our way. I knew this very moment, the shove, the file, would circle the globe overnight. And this was only the beginning. I sat amid the broken glass, the faint scent of blood in the air, my eyes locked on my father. He stood frozen, unable to grasp that his push hadn't broken me. The guests whispered, some recording, others gaping. The opulent mansion suddenly felt suffocating. I forced myself to stand, shards slipping from my gown. My voice was raspy but firm. "You may think everything is still in your hands. But in reality you've lost more than you can imagine." Richard scowled, fury mixed with confusion. Ethan stepped forward, a smirk lingering. "You're just bluffing. Who would believe a girl thrown through glass could possibly hold power here?" I pulled my phone from my purse, holding up the glowing screen for all to see. Notifications popped up one after another. Account frozen. Property ownership successfully transferred. Filing confirmed at EC. A wave of murmurs swept the hall. Every gaze turned to Richard, then back to me. "Not just the company," I said, eyes fixed on my father, "but every property, every car, every yacht, even this mansion, are under shell companies you thought you controlled. Now they all belong to me." Sophia dropped her glittering clutch, the sound echoing across the room. Trembling, she stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Ava, you can't do this. We're family." I looked at my sister, a faint smile on my lips. Family doesn't steal from each other's work. Family doesn't sell off a legacy just for quick cash. Richard yanked his phone from his pocket, fumbling frantically. I knew what he was checking. Seconds later, his face went pale. The same notifications appeared. Empty accounts, ownership transferred. The whispers turned into stunned murmurs. Some guests zoomed their cameras in, capturing every expression of the man once praised as a symbol of success. "You don't even know the full picture," I continued, my tone steady but icy. "All the financial fraud records of you and Ethan have been sent to the Securities and Exchange Commission. They're very eager to talk to both of you." Ethan's face drained of color. He rushed toward me, his voice urgent. "You don't understand what you're doing. We'll all be dragged down together." I shook my head, cutting him off. "No, Ethan. Only those who are greedy and treacherous will go down. As for me, I've prepared all the evidence." Richard roared, his voice hoarse. "How dare you? This is my house, my company, everything built by me." I walked slowly toward him, eyes unblinking. "You've forgotten, father. I'm the one who stayed up night after night, signed every contract, wrote every line of code. You only wore the title of founder to hide the truth." A heavy silence settled over the hall. I turned to the guests, my voice ringing clear. "You have just witnessed a father throw his daughter through a glass door simply because she dared to protect the company from being sold off. This is the so-called successful businessman you all once praised." The sounds of ragged breathing, recording phones, and whispers blended into chaos. I knew that by morning, this video would flood every corner of social media. I drew a deep breath and declared, "Father Ethan, Sophia, pack your things. Before sunrise, I want you out of this mansion. Everything here now belongs to me. If you're still here when the sun rises, the police will be the ones escorting you out." Sophia burst into tears, her voice breaking. "Ava, please, don't do this." I looked at her, a flicker of bitterness in my chest, but stayed firm. "I've given you all too many chances. And you turned them into knives to stab me in the back." Richard staggered back, dazed. Never in his life had his mask been torn off so publicly. Ethan clenched his fists but said nothing. I straightened my dress, plucked a shard of glass from my hair, and turned calmly. "The party's over. Everyone may leave now." My voice was calm but resolute. The crowd began to scatter, whispering as they went. Phones still glowed, recording every second of the Hayes family frozen like statues among shattered glass. I stepped out onto the terrace, breathing in the salty ocean air. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Sarah. "All procedures are complete. From now on, Hayes Dynamics and all related assets officially belong to you. The SEC has received the files. Sleep well, Ava. I smiled faintly, my eyes stinging. Sleep well. I wouldn't sleep tonight. But I knew that tomorrow's dawn would be a new beginning. A beginning without shadows. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight streamed through the glass windows of the 35th floor office, shining on my face. No longer the cramped backroom I had been shoved into, but the CEO's office of Hayes Dynamics, once reserved only for my father and Ethan. I hadn't slept all night. My phone rang endlessly. Reporters wanting interviews, partners calling in panic, employees flooding my inbox. But the most important message was from Sarah. The board demands an emergency meeting this morning. You must be ready. I slipped into a simple gray suit, covering the scratches still fresh on my arms. As I stepped out of the elevator, the looks from the staff in the lobby made me pause. Curiosity, admiration, and hope. They had heard the news. They were all waiting to see if I truly had the strength to keep this ship afloat. The top floor conference room was lit brightly. Inside, 11 board members sat around the long table, their faces tense. Some had been my father's closest allies. Others had treated me as if I were invisible. The interim chairman, Mr. Maxwell, a silver-haired man, tapped the table lightly. Ava Hayes, thank you for coming. We need you to explain. Last night's news was too shocking. I took a deep breath, opened my leather briefcase, and placed a thick stack of files neatly in front of me. I understand your doubts. But everything I've done is legal. Here is the certificate showing I own 52% of Hayes Dynamics, signed through intermediary companies, verified by an independent auditing firm. I handed each of them a folder. Pages printed with numbers, signatures, and seals. The room fell silent as they examined them one by one. Another member, Mrs. Lopez, frowned. And what about Richard and Ethan? Rumors say they embezzled. I turned on the projector, presenting each piece of evidence. The money transfers, the fake contracts, the internal emails. My voice was firm, each sentence cutting through the veil of lies like a blade. They siphoned off tens of millions of dollars from the company, moving them through shell companies. If the sell-off deal succeeded, every employee would lose their job. I couldn't allow that to happen. The air grew heavy. Some lowered their heads, others sighed. Maxwell clasped his hands, staring at me. If what you say is true, then your father and Ethan will face criminal investigation. But what we care about right now is your next plan. I nodded. This was the moment I had prepared for over months. Hayes Dynamics needs renewal. I will cut all shady projects, halt risky loans. We will focus on our strengths: cybersecurity and artificial intelligence applied in healthcare. I've also reached out to 3 promising startups to discuss partnerships and expand our product line. I switched the slide, showing growth forecasts and plans to cut the extravagant costs my father used to maintain. Instead of spending money on lavish parties, we will reinvest in people. I've created an internal fund to support young employees in research and innovation. Because they are the true future of this company. Mrs. Lopez nodded slightly. Another member, Mr. Peterson, leaned back in his chair, muttering, "How long has she been doing this?" Sarah, sitting next to me as legal counsel, answered for me, 6 months. Every step carefully taken, every transaction legal, every piece of evidence archived. Nothing here can be challenged. Maxwell was silent for a long while. Finally, he set the file down, glanced around the room, and spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, it's clear that Ava Hayes has prepared more thoroughly than any of us. I propose we vote now, recognize her as the new CEO of Hayes Dynamics. A wave of exchanged looks. Hands rose one after another. Within seconds, the result was clear. 8 in favor, 2 abstentions, 1 against. My heart pounded. But I kept my composure, only nodding slightly. Thank you for your trust. I promised to lead this company down the path it should have followed from the beginning. Transparency, innovation, and putting people first. After the meeting, I returned to my office. Through the wide glass windows, Miami shone bright under the sun. On my screen, dozens of emails from employees poured in. We support you. Thank you for protecting the company. We believe in a new future. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from an unknown number. Ava, do you really think you've won? You've only just begun. Ethan. I clenched the phone, a chill running through me. I knew the battle wasn't over. My family, the very people who once shared my home, had become hidden enemies. I turned to Sarah, who was scanning more documents. Prepare for the worst-case scenario. I don't think they'll give up easily. Sarah looked up, her eyes resolute. True. But this time, Ava, you have both the power and the truth on your side. I stared out at the blue sky, my fists tightening. My mother's words echoed inside me. Never bow to what's wrong. And I knew from this day on I would no longer be a shadow. I was the one rewriting my own story, and that of Hayes Dynamics. After the board meeting, I thought I had stepped into a new chapter, but my phone screen pulled me down again. A message from an unknown number, just one line. Ava, you think you know it all? Ask again how your mother really died. My fingers went cold. Mother, Maria Hayes, died when I was 16 in a car crash on the interstate. The report at the time stated, lost control due to rain, the car slid off the road. I had buried that memory for years. But deep down I had never fully believed it was the truth. I immediately sent a message to Sarah. Find me all the records of my mother's accident. Even the sealed parts. 2 days later, in my new office, Sarah brought me an old file, the edges yellowed with age. Ava, we had to get a court order to open this. There are many irregularities. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. The initial investigation report read, Lead Investigator, Michael Porter. But next to it was a red note, Case incomplete. Investigator went missing after 6 months. Missing? I whispered. Sarah nodded, handing me a few more papers. Around that same time, there was a $3 million transfer into Porter's account. After that, he vanished. 6 months later, news reports claimed he drowned on a boating trip in the Florida Keys. But no witnesses were ever confirmed. A chill ran down my spine. $3 million for silence, followed by a sudden death. I kept reading until I reached the scene photos. My chest tightened. The old report only said lost control. But in the documents Sarah had obtained, there were unpublished photos. Long skid marks on the road, clear signs of a car being forced. On the left side of my mother's sedan, there was black paint transfer. We checked, Sarah said slowly. That paint code matches a Cadillac SUV registered that year, under Ethan Hayes' name. The papers slipped from my hands. I sat frozen. No, I didn't want to believe it. Ethan, who once put his arm around me in high school, who promised to shield me from father's harshness. But the cold evidence left no room for denial. There's more, Ava, Sarah continued, placing a few printed emails in front of me, recovered from the old company servers. This exchange between Richard and Ethan happened just days before your mother's death. I read the lines. We need to handle the situation before it ruins everything. I understand. Leave it to me. My mind spun. My mother's voice echoed from memory. Ava, I found something. Everything is going to change. The truth is coming out. That was the last call, just hours before she left the office and never came back. I sat there for a long time, staring at the cold pages, feeling as if an invisible hand was choking me. Everything was becoming clear. Mother had uncovered the embezzlement. She was going to expose it. But father and Ethan chose the cruelest way to silence her. Sarah placed a hand on my shoulder. Ava, what do you want to do next? I drew a deep breath, my voice firm. Keep going. Find more evidence. We'll reopen the case. I don't care how well they covered it up. If they dared to take my mother's life, then this time they'll pay for it. Inside me, a new fire ignited, fiercer than all the hatred I had carried before. The battle for the company was only the beginning. Now I knew, the truth about my mother's death was the real war. That night I sat alone in my office, the city of Miami glittering beyond the glass. I opened my laptop, once again reviewing the emails, the transactions, the crash photos. Each detail was a puzzle piece, forming the dark picture I had long avoided. My phone buzzed. Another message from the same unknown number. Stop, Ava. Some graves should stay buried. Your mother knew that, but she didn't listen. Don't make her mistake. I stared at the words, every nerve pulled taut. This wasn't a threat. It was a warning. And I knew only one person could have written it, Sophia. Though she had stayed silent through it all, I'd seen the conflict in her eyes that night. Maybe she knew more than she had admitted. I typed back a single line, my hand steady. If you still have any humanity left, tell me the truth. I won't stop. Then I closed my phone and gazed into the night. Fear lingered, but stronger still was the sense that I had stepped onto a path with no return. And this time I wouldn't just protect the company. I would seek justice for my mother, at any cost. That night, dark clouds gathered over Miami's sky. I sat in the top-floor office of Hayes Dynamics, the glow of my laptop screen lighting my face. On the screen were dozens of classified files, all stored in a system named Protocol Zero, a program Sarah and I had built. The principle was simple. If anything happened to me, all the data on fraud, money laundering, and Richard and Ethan's secret dealings would be automatically sent to the press, the SEC, and the FBI at once. It was my final shield. The phone rang. Sarah's voice was tense. Ava, Intel just came back. Ethan is on his way to the company and he's not coming alone. 3 SUVs full of strangers. I closed my eyes for a few seconds. I knew this moment would come. Since I stripped away his control, Ethan had never accepted defeat. Are they ready? I asked. Sarah understood immediately. SWAT and the city police are in position around the building. They're just waiting for the signal. I nodded slightly, ended the call. A primal fear rose in me, but so did a strange calm. I was prepared. The lobby doors burst open. Security cameras showed Ethan stepping inside, followed by 3 tall men in black coats, their eyes cold. I stared at the screen, exhaling slowly. He glanced up at the camera, smirking as if he knew I was watching. Then he strode into the elevator, pressing the button for the top floor. I stood, straightened my blazer, then pressed the button on my desk. Protocol Zero, armed. A red message blinked. If Ava Hayes is neutralized, data will auto-release in 60 seconds. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. Ethan appeared in an expensive suit but with bloodshot eyes. The 3 men fanned out, surrounding the room. Hello, little sister. Ethan sneered. You really think you've won? I kept my voice calm. I don't think. I know. Cancel what you sent to the SEC, he growled. Give the company back. Or you'll regret it. I walked slowly to the desk, my finger brushing the USB drive already plugged in. If you touch me, the data will release. The whole world will know what you've done. Ethan faltered. One of the men slipped a hand inside his coat. But at that instant the office windows rattled. Police. A voice thundered. Red laser dots lit every target. From the hallway the SWAT team stormed in, fully armed, moving with precision. The 3 men froze, hands shooting up, faces pale. Ethan backed away, eyes darting wildly. Nobody move, the SWAT commander barked. Ethan Hayes, you are under arrest for suspected financial fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of federal investigation. The room erupted in chaos for a few seconds. Ethan was pinned, the sharp clink of handcuffs echoing. I stood motionless, watching the brother once celebrated, now bowing his head, face twisted in rage. You sold out the family, he spat. You're not a Hayes. I replied, my voice low and steady. Exactly because I am a Hayes. I couldn't let you destroy everything. Ethan was led away. The other 3 men were subdued. The building vibrated with boots stomping, radios crackling. His hastily built network was dismantled in minutes. When only Sarah and I remained, she stepped forward, gripping my hand. Ava, you did it. I looked at the desk where the red Protocol Zero message had turned green. Safe. No breach detected. A long breath escaped my chest. The months of tension seemed to burst all at once. But deep inside I knew this was only the beginning. Because even though Ethan was arrested, one man still walked free. Richard Hayes. My father. That night I stayed alone in the office, the city lights streaming through the wide glass. I stared at the empty chair across the desk. The chair where father once sat, where he signed contracts, where he wore the mask of a model businessman. I whispered almost to myself, I will see this through. For mother. For the truth. The clock ticked steadily. I knew as Ethan's cell door closed behind him, another door had opened. The final confrontation with the man who had given me life. And this time I would bring more than files, lawyers, or SWAT. I would bring the truth they had buried for 15 years. 1 year after that chaotic night at Hayes Dynamics, the federal courthouse in Miami was packed. Reporters crowded the hallways, cameras flashing nonstop. The trial of Richard Hayes and accomplices had become a national spectacle, not just for the staggering scale of the financial crimes, but because a murder buried for 15 years was finally being brought to light. I sat in the front row, my hands clenched, my heart pounding as the prosecutor rose to open. Your Honor, today we are not only prosecuting large-scale embezzlement and fraud, but we are also reopening a case once thought closed: the death of Maria Hayes. My mother's name filled the courtroom, and in that moment, it felt as if a beam of light had broken through. The first witness called was Sophia. She stepped onto the stand with a gaunt face and red-rimmed eyes. For the past year she had been in therapy, confronting years of silence and complicity. Her voice trembled. I heard the conversation between Father and Ethan on the night Mother died. Father said, "She knows too much. We have to handle it." Ethan was silent, then nodded. I didn't dare say anything. The courtroom buzzed. I turned to look at her. Sophia met my eyes, tears spilling, but she nodded firmly. For the first time I saw her truly face her conscience. Next, the prosecutor displayed a photo on the screen. Long skid marks, black paint transfer with a new technical report confirming my mother's car had been forced off the road by a Cadillac SUV. This vehicle was registered under Ethan Hayes, the prosecutor stated. On the defense side, Ethan lowered his head, his hands trembling. His lawyer rose. Your Honor, my client agrees to plead guilty to the charge of intentional vehicular manslaughter, along with his involvement in the financial crimes, in exchange for a 20-year sentence. Murmurs rose again. I looked at my brother, the family's public role model, now slumped in prison attire. In his eyes I caught a flicker of regret, but it was far too late. Richard sat upright, his face like stone. When questioned, he denied everything, shifting the blame onto Ethan. He acted alone, I never gave the order. I'm the victim. But the restored emails from the company server told another story. We need to handle the situation before it ruins everything. I understand. Leave it to me. The judge read them slowly, each word like a nail driven in. The prosecutor concluded. Richard Hayes was not only the man who embezzled tens of millions of dollars for years, but also the mastermind behind his wife's murder to cover up his crimes. The air fell silent. All eyes turned to the man once hailed as a business legend. On sentencing day I sat still, gripping the only keepsake from my mother, the silver bracelet she gave me when I was 15. The judge's gavel struck, his deep voice filling the courtroom. Defendant Ethan Hayes, for cooperating and confessing, this court sentences you to 20 years in prison, with no parole for at least the first 15. Ethan collapsed, eyes shut. Defendant Richard Hayes, for first-degree murder and extensive financial crimes, this court sentences you to life in prison without parole. The gavel thundered. Richard leapt up, screaming, "You traitors! I built everything." Police restrained him instantly, dragging him out. The courtroom echoed with whispers and the rapid clicks of cameras. I sat there, tears falling but my heart lighter than ever. At last the truth was acknowledged. My mother, Maria Hayes, had not died in a random accident. She had been silenced for standing against greed. And justice, though late, had arrived. After the trial, Sophia approached me. Her face was worn, but her eyes were clear. "Ava, I can never make up for my silence. But I'll try. I've enrolled in long-term therapy and I want to testify in support of other victims." I embraced her for the first time in years. "What matters is that you spoke out. Mother would be proud of you." Sophia sobbed, but a faint smile broke through. As I left the courthouse, cameras turned toward me, reporters shouting, "Ava, how do you feel seeing your father and brother brought to justice? What's next for Hayes Dynamics? Will you forgive them?" I paused, looked straight into the lenses and spoke calmly but firmly. "Forgiveness may come later. But the truth must be revealed now. And today it has been." I walked past the reporters, sea air tossing my hair. In my heart my mother's words whispered, "Never bow to what's wrong." And I knew, I had done what she never got the chance to finish. A year after the fateful trial, Hayes Dynamics headquarters bore a completely new look. The grand golden plaque at the entrance was gone, replaced with a simple sign, "Hayes Dynamics, Technology for Humanity." I walked through the wide lobby, eyes on the photos along the walls. No longer portraits of Richard Hayes, but images of employees working on community projects, from supporting small hospitals in Texas to clean energy programs in Arizona. The company had changed. No more meaningless lavish spending, no more show-off parties that once pushed people apart. Instead, we invested heavily in sustainable technology and employee welfare. On my first official day as CEO, I made a decision that surprised many, merging with 3 small companies on the brink of bankruptcy. If we let them collapse, I said in the board meeting, thousands of jobs will be lost. But if we bring them under one roof, we'll keep brilliant minds and strengthen innovation. The decision faced strong opposition. But just 6 months later, the results were clear. Thousands of employees not only kept their jobs, but also had opportunities to grow. Those 3 small companies brought fresh air, bold ideas, helping Hays Dynamics lead in cybersecurity and medical AI technology. I never forgot the most important thing: my mother's legacy. Maria Hays sacrificed herself in the pursuit of truth, and I knew she always dreamed of a company that not only profited but carried responsibility to the community. So, on the anniversary of her passing, I announced the creation of the Maria Hays Scholarship Fund. This fund selects 10 students from underprivileged families, granting them full scholarships to study technology at top universities. On the day of the ceremony, I stood on stage, looking at those young faces glowing with hope. In that moment, I felt my mother's voice whispering, "Never bow to what's wrong and help those who never had the chances you did." My voice caught, but I smiled. This is not just a scholarship. This is a way to continue a dream that was stolen. You're the future. The entire hall rose in applause. And for the first time I felt clearly, my mother had never left. Of course, wounds from the past couldn't vanish completely. Ethan remained in prison serving his 20-year sentence. I visited him only once. He looked a decade older, eyes hollow. We said little, just sat in silence. I knew he regretted, but the way back was closed. As for Richard, my father, he was serving life. Recent news said his health was failing, but I felt neither relief nor hatred. Only emptiness, like watching an old statue crumble. Sophia was different. After cooperating as a witness, she entered therapy and began social work. Recently, she sent me a picture. She stood with a group of young women at a domestic violence support center. Beneath it, she wrote, "Ava, I'm learning how to make amends." I stared at that photo for a long time, and for the first time, I felt a space inside me for forgiveness. This morning, as I sat in the CEO's office, I looked out at the waking city. Towers gleamed in the sunlight, streams of cars rushed along the streets. Sarah walked in, placing a report on my desk. "Ava, the partnership with the European firms is finalized. This will be a big step for our renewable energy sector." I nodded, then asked softly, "We're on the right path, aren't we?" Sarah smiled. "You didn't just keep the company standing. You've made it into what your mother always wanted." I turned to the window, my heart swelling with conviction. A year ago, I was just the shadow of the family. But today, I had become the one rewriting the story, not just for myself but for thousands bound to Hays Dynamics. I whispered as if to my mother, "I did it, Mom. And this is only the beginning." Outside, the sun climbed higher, illuminating a new path. A path built on truth, justice, and the hunger for change. Ava's story reveals a timeless truth. Justice only takes shape when the truth is exposed and upheld by the strength of law. In real life, many still silently endure violence, manipulation, and injustice within their own families. But like Ava, we can find a way out by daring to face it, daring to speak, and wielding evidence as a weapon. Success can be sweet revenge, but truth is freedom, and freedom is always worth the most. What do you think about Ava's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional and surprising stories about family life.